Good morning. This is Dallas Townsend with the CBS World News Roundup. The siege in northern Holland is over. The hostages have been rescued and the terrorists are in custody. The stalemate at the city of Assen ended less than an hour ago, and Dave Durham reports from Amsterdam.
The siege lasted 28 hours and was ended when Dutch military forces stormed the building. The attack by the contingent of Dutch Marines took place less than an hour after the gunman's deadline had passed. During the gun battle, 4 hostages were slightly wounded, but reports indicate that no one was killed. All 3 of the South Moluccan terrorists are now in police custody, and all hostages have been released. Dutch government spokesmen indicate that the action was taken because they believed the terrorists would follow through with their threat to kill their hostages. Dave Durham for CBS News, Amsterdam.
Egyptian President Sadat this morning denounced Saturday's Palestinian guerrilla raid in Israel. It's the first Arab condemnation of the attack. Sadat told reporters that the raid was a very sad and tragic episode, but he urged restraint on all sides and called for an end to the vicious circle of strike and counterstrike in the Middle East. Tel Aviv is hearing rumors about an Egyptian warning not to retaliate, but Bruno Wasserteil tells us that American embassy officials say they don't know anything about it.
It was reported that such a warning was given to the U.S. ambassador in Egypt for transmission to Israel. An Israeli foreign ministry official told CBS News that no such warning has been received here through U.S. diplomatic channels or any other way. But the whole question of a warning may be academic. In the past, Israel has always disregarded such cautionary pronouncements from Cairo, and considering the severity of Saturday's raid, it's not likely that it would heed them now. The Israeli rule of thumb is, if they hit us, we have every right to hit back. Bruno Wasserteil for CBS News in Tel Aviv.
Mike Lee reports from Beirut that the American ambassador to Lebanon, Richard Parker, met this morning with the Lebanese foreign minister as intense diplomatic contacts continued in Beirut in an effort to avoid an escalation of Middle East tensions. Lee says that skies have cleared over the Lebanese capital, strengthening fears that an Israeli reprisal of some sort may be at hand. PLO leader Yasser Arafat claims that Israel is preparing for a large-scale military operation against the Palestinians. Off to an early start this morning, the Senate is pressing ahead with its debate on the Panama Canal treaties as it prepares to vote on the first of the two day after tomorrow. And Neil Strasser reports it still looks like a cliffhanger.
The tide seems to be running back and forth in the fight for the 8 or 10 undecided votes that could determine the fate of the Canal Neutrality Treaty. One of the few undecided Republicans, William Roth of Delaware, this morning is announcing he will vote against the treaty. Roth saying the U.S. has no effective voice after the canal turnover in its maintenance or efficient operation. He says the treaty should be renegotiated. And the administration, in negotiations with 6 or 7 key Democrats, appears so far to have won only 3 certain votes. And one of the Democrats, Wendell Ford of Kentucky, has said, "Don't count on me." The administration, according to members of the group, has promised to support separate treaty reservations to allow the U.S. to negotiate to keep troops in Panama after the canal turnover and to intervene if there are stoppages in canal service. The concessions go so far in rewriting the spirit of the treaties that several members of the group doubt whether the reservations can really be binding on Panama or accepted by it. As a result, the votes of 2 or 3 other Democrats may be in doubt, and the ratification of the treaty still seems in doubt as well. Neil Strasser, CBS News, the U.S. Senate.
Tong-Sun Park is back on Capitol Hill this morning, commencing 4 days of testimony before the Senate Ethics Committee on the South Korean influence buying scandal. Jed Duval has details.
The lights were on late in the offices of Tong-Sun Park's American attorney last night. Park and the small detail of federal marshals who guard him were in the office with lawyer William Hundley preparing for today's appearance. Throughout the many stories that make up the Korean bribery scandal, there are very few mentions of Senate contacts among the evidence assembled about Park or other Korean lobbyists. Names of a few senators have emerged, however, enough to bring about an investigation within that body's ethics unit, an investigation that has been carried out in the background, while most public attention has been turned on the counterpart committee in the House. Still another interest, the House Subcommittee on International Organizations will this week have something of its own to say about Park. This subcommittee says newly declassified intelligence documents in its possession show that Park has long had a working relationship with the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, despite Park's many denials to the contrary. For Park, the return to Washington has not been entirely arduous. He was in the crowd Saturday night when comedian Mark Russell asked a nightclub audience in Washington if Tong-Sun Park is an influential Korean lobbyist or a nice place to have a picnic. Jed Duval, CBS News, Washington.
Tomorrow, a House International Relations Subcommittee also begins hearings on the Korean bribery affair, and former Attorney General John Mitchell has been given a 2-week extension of his prison furlough so that he can tell what he knows about the scandal. However, the Justice Department says Mitchell's appearance depends on clearance by his doctor. House Republicans today are mounting a campaign to defeat a Democratic plan to limit spending for congressional campaigns. It was approved yesterday by the House Administration Committee 16-9, with all committee Republicans and Democrat Mendel Davis of South Carolina voting against it. Mariah McLaughlin examines the plan's prospects on the House floor.
Republicans say they will invoke the rules of the House, demanding roll call votes on everything, no matter how small, to indicate their intention of fighting off the Democratic proposal to limit the amount of money that a national party committee, a congressional campaign committee, and a state party could give to a congressional candidate. This is particularly important to the Republicans because they hope to make some inroads on the Democratic majority in Congress, and they hope to do it by outspending their Democratic friends. The Republican National Party committees raised about $18.5 million in 1977. The Democrats raised only $5.6 million. The Democrats hope to bring the measure to the floor next week. The Republicans are hoping to stall the House, make it impossible to get any work done, and force the Democrats to forget the whole idea. It's a case of survival for us, says Republican Congressman Bill Frenzel, adding, "This is the most bald-faced attack on the minority by the majority I've ever seen. They're hogs." Mariah McLaughlin, CBS News, Washington.
If the measure is approved in the House, Republicans say they'll try to filibuster it to death in the Senate. After a day of talking things over by telephone, representatives of the soft coal industry and the mine workers union plan to resume formal negotiations today in Washington. Federal mediators are hoping for agreement on a new contract that could end the nationwide strike, now 99 days old. As for what's going on or is not going on in the coal fields, Don Webster reports from Pittsburgh.
The official government line remains the hope that the United Mine Workers will trickle back to work this week. But yesterday's showing was so dismal, almost no union members reporting for work under Taft-Hartley, that the union seems justified in believing virtually none of its members will go back to work. For the moment, at least, there seems to be a standoff, with each party of the opinion it's the other side's turn to make a move. The union thinks if Taft-Hartley is not effective, the government will start action to seize the mines. Reports from Washington indicate any such seizure is some time away. So for the next few days, the pattern seems clear. Very little coal will be mined. Everyone is watching the renewed negotiations in Washington, and the nation's coal and power crisis will get very little relief. Don Webster, CBS News, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
A riot broke out this morning in Buenos Aires at a prison housing hundreds of political prisoners. Police say 44 people were killed. It happened after inmates apparently took over one of the cell blocks, and police brought in tear gas and helicopters in a move to put down the disorders. An unidentified man seized a school bus this morning in Walled Lake, Michigan, outside Detroit, and a short time later was shot by police. Authorities say none of the students aboard the bus was injured, nor was the bus driver. The U.S. dollar fell to another all-time low this morning in Tokyo, closing at 233 yen, presumably because of dissatisfaction with the measures announced yesterday by Bonn and Washington to defend the U.S. currency. The dollar improved somewhat in London and Paris, but was down again on other European exchanges. The Vatican announced this morning that Pope Paul is suffering from influenza and has canceled tomorrow's weekly general audience in order to save his strength for the approaching Easter ceremonies. A high official of the European Common Market arrived in Tokyo today for talks on reducing Japan's massive trade surplus with the European trading community. The market wants Japan to take positive measures to reduce the surplus before the Common Market holds a summit conference in Copenhagen next month.